This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. Jordan Girth here from the National Weather Service Office of Observations. Thank you for joining us for the Satellite Book Club Seminar Series. This is session number 79. We're back after a winter break. Happy 2022. I hope it's off to a good and healthy start for you. The presentation for today is AWIPS2 satellite enhancements at the national centers. NCEP NAWIPS to AWIPS migration enhancements useful to the Weather Service field offices. The presenter is Monica Bozeman, physical scientist and project manager from the National Weather Service Office of Central Processing. And our facilitator is Mark DeMaria, senior research scientist at CIRA and recent retiree from the National Hurricane Center. Just a few reminders before we get started. As you just heard, this session is being recorded. There will be an opportunity for Q&A after the presentation. We particularly encourage questions and perhaps comments from those of you joining us from field offices and regional headquarters within the National Weather Service. This is one of the core purposes of the Satellite Book Club, is to have some discussion. We are looking for future presenters, so if you have an application you'd like to share with members of the Weather Service field, please get in touch with us. We'd love to have you present. And if you're looking for training materials, please contact Brian Mott, the Office of the Chief Learning Officer. He has all the information and all the answers to your questions regarding that. I'd like to thank the Tower S team, particularly Kashad Bowman, all of his behind the scenes work, the Office of the Chief Learning Officer, the GOZAR, and the JPSS program for their support of the Satellite Book Club, and of course, our facilitator and other members of our Tower S team. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Monica. Monica is a physical scientist, as I mentioned, in CP, where she is now the NCEP NAWIPS to AWIPS2 program manager, in addition to being the automated language translation lead for all of the National Weather Service and the JPSS Proving Ground Risk Reduction Tropical Cyclone Initiative Facilitator. Prior to joining CP in 2020, Monica was a meteorologist programmer at the Hurricane Center for the past 9 years, where she was the satellite data focal point and involved in creating AWIPS2 training and maintaining the automated tropical cyclone forecast ATCF software and data flow. So Monica, thank you and welcome to the Satellite Book Club.
Thank you, Jordan. Can you guys see and hear me?
Both.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys for letting me present to you. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I hope you guys get excited about some of these enhancements that we've done with the NAWIPS to AWIPS transition. A lot of the field offices may not be familiar with what's been going on data set wise, improvements to AWIPS wise. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk about that and see if some of those spark your interest. Then you can see about getting it at your office, or if some of those things have helped you, will help you in the future. And so we'll just go ahead and get started. If Kashad, you can switch to the next slide, please. All right, so as you probably know, the national centers are attempting to transition from NAWIPS. There's the screenshot of sort of what that looks like on the left side of the screen to AWIPS2, which you all are familiar with at the WFOs and the field regions. And so main objective is to get everyone on the same page, on the same software, as we call a common operating picture. That way the offices can talk to each other a little better. You guys can use that collaboration tool in AWIPS with the centers a little easier if you need to. And then it also saves us on some costs with supporting AWIPS on top of the legacy NAWIPS at the centers. SWIPSI has some software that they're using, and also the ATCF system at the Hurricane Center is another additional system. So trying to get everything streamlined onto one platform would save the Weather Service a lot of money, help with communications between offices, and hopefully be a good thing for everyone going forward in the future. Next slide. All right, so what I'm talking about today, since it's Satellite Book Club, I wanted to start with hitting you all with particularly satellite data sets and displays at the centers. A couple of tools that we've got going on, and then for The data providers, just a little plug, will get a little bit nerdy for you and explain how some of those data sets were created, just to keep you interested. NCEP also created a custom satellite menu that they're using. We've got some enhanced observation displays, and then at the end, I'll talk about something really exciting for me, is some training that we're doing for site admins and data providers. If you're interested, and you can ask me tons of questions about that at the end. And then if time allows, I just wanted to show off a couple additional non-satellite enhancements and tools that maybe you would also find useful. All right, next slide. So I heard through the grapevine that a few of the WFO offices were a little bit afraid of using the DMWs from GOES-R, which is such a shame. That's one of the data sets that the centers were very excited about getting, because even before GOES-R, there was what they called SAT-WINs, very adamant about getting that data set in as one of the first things along with the GOES-R imagery. And because the national centers have such large areas, they wanted it globally. And so the fact that I hear that some of the WFOs are not even utilizing some of this in their CWAs or complaining that things are slow is very disappointing. So I wanted to let you know that there's this, we added an index to the DMW table within AWIPS, which was crucial, we found, for decent load times. So I've got a picture here of work we did with the centers, where I just cropped it to CONUS, just because that's usually what you all would look at. But after doing work with the centers, they like to see the winds with all like separated by pressure as opposed to speed, which is one of the displays you guys had first. So now the all pressure layer plot is applied to your menu structure, but also because of that index, now they should load a bit faster. So I'm trying to reassure you that it's okay to look at those and blow it up as big as you need to, because the centers, they're looking at it on a global scale for both GOES East and GOES West. There's even more, which I'll talk about later. A lot of data is going into that DMW table, thousands and thousands and thousands of point data sets with information that the centers are pushing through there, and it's able to keep up with it. It loads a little slow initially, but the performance is there. So I just wanted to take a moment and mention that the centers are able to see such a large area with all of the data that they use for the DMW table, and that it does perform okay. So trying to reassure you, go ahead and take a look at those. Spread it out from your CWA for a little bit. Look at the CONUS, it should be okay to load. And if you have any questions, we have some documentation for you to verify and check that you do have that index added to your table. So feel free to reach out to me, other folks in Tower S, and we can get you that documentation for you, or talk to your region as well. Next slide. Okay, here's another one where the initial rollout of the display was less than desirable. So on the left, I have the N-AWIPS display of what the centers would see for altimeters versus the DBGEO implementation for altimeters was the initial rollout in AWIPS2. So when the centers looked at this the first time, they're like, this is not going to work for us. I need, to be able to load more than one stripe of altimeters. I need to have some more informational sampling. Granted, the centers never had sampling before in N-AWIPS, so that was a big deal to them once they figured out how that worked, and they were super excited about it. But the DBGEO plugin was not going to come up to snuff with what they wanted to see, so we had to update the display, but they wanted it to be enhanced by AWIPS2 features. So if you flip to the next slide. All right, here's where I'm going to get nerdy for you. We took creative license with the DMW plugin. And as I mentioned in the first slide about DMWs, there's a lot of data going on in this table. So not only do you have the DMWs in this table, now we're implementing altimeter points in this table for all the altimeters that are available. So there are a couple modifications we had to make. Luckily, the altimeter files were already in NetCDF4 format, so we just had some processing code called ISATs that had to make a couple of modifications to that original file, so that way we can push it into the DMW table. And so I've highlighted in colors the different table entries that were needed for this decoder. Another thing we did in green was the scene. We just said the scene for all of these is altimeters. That way, whenever you put it in a bundle, you can just pull up all the altimeters at once, which was a requirement for the centers. And so we got pretty close to what the N-AWIPS display looked like. And they got sampling, which they were very excited about. One of the negatives, though, kind of since there's no more color map, your legend and your sampling kind of turns into your color map. And so the more data you load, those can kind of get large and stack up on you. So best practice would be to hide your legend if you really wanted to. But I think based off of the initial rollout with the DBGeo plugin, this looks a lot better to what N-AWIPS they were originally expecting. And perhaps you guys at the WFOs could use this too as something more informative if you're interested. So another thing that we had to do for timing was all this data comes in so fast, so frequently. We had to bin it by 30-minute increments so that way it would store and have a reference time. But then in the sampling, we've got the actual time that the observation was taken, so that way you're not fudging that time, which is very important for the op. So that's the kind of work we did for this one for altimeters, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. The centers are very happy with it, and I think it's a great improvement over the initial rollout for this data set. So next slide. All right, so then ASCAT. I know a lot of other folks might use the ASCAT as well. So basically, we built upon what we learned whenever we did the altimeters, and did a very similar situation again in the DMW decoder. We had to add a couple of things to the file. However, the original file format was MGDR Lite, which you can only get from the NESDIS PDA at the moment. And so that was provided. We used ISATs again to modify those files. And so I have a couple of pictures on here. So Kashad, if you could move the mouse around for me. There we go. Yep, right where you are. The lower left is the baseline buffer ASCAT decoder, which is the normal implementation. Issues with that one for the centers was that it didn't have region 10, which is the Southern Hemisphere. So OPC in particular was missing a bunch of their data. The green box, that's what the sampling looked like for that decoder at the time. And obviously the centers needed a little more detail in what they were seeing in the sampling. So again, using that DMW decoder table, we modified the sampling, and then now we're able to see both a readout for ASCAT A, ASCAT B. Now ASCAT C is a thing, so that's in there too. And then you can do multiple passes, as you'll see in the blue box, blue image on the upper right-hand side. Again, your legends get a bit long because with DMW, you don't have a color map. So that's another interesting one that the centers have taken on to and really like this one as well. Next slide. All right, here's another fun one. Is the microwave imagery, especially for the Hurricane Center. What they were doing before is they were going to the NRLTC page, which is great because it's zoomed in right to the hurricane, and you can get the GOES or the geostationary, and you can get the swath on top of the storm. However, you would have to click, it was online, so it's not on your operational system. you'd have to click through a couple of pictures to get what you want. It was a little difficult, so to get the vertical structure necessarily, you really have to remember in your head how that looked. So one of the goals for at least the Hurricane Center was to get multiple passes at the same time. And then another thing we came up with was making them a 4-panel of the microwave imagery. So they can get the upper and the lower bands of the microwave and then see that in their head, that vertical structure of what the storm looks like. And they can zoom in, use that fancy zoom in AWIPS that they like so much. And then they're able to get global coverage. Whereas in N-AWIPS, they would get one scan at a time. And that was a pain in the butt, which is why they would use the NRLTC page anyway. So we're trying to give them a way to get off of websites, stay on the operational system, utilize AWIPS2 to look at satellite data primarily. So the way that we did this particular one is there's an issue where, since it's polar, you have to decide, are you going to use the PointSet plugin, which is also good for polar, or in this case, we use the GOES-R plugin. It's like, why would we do that? It's for GOES-R. So that's where some of the training I mentioned at the very beginning will come in handy for data providers and people like that. So the reason we went with the GOES-R plugin, what we did is we sliced up each of the passes into 3 sectors based off of latitude and reprojected those. And then the GOES-R plugin allows for derived parameters, so we could get that RGB that you would see on the tropical cyclone webpage. And that was really important because we needed the RGB, which is why we chose the GOES-R decoder over using PointSet, which would be really more beneficial for the raw brightness temperature. So if you're ever wondering for polar and you happen to need an RGB, what decoder to put that in, that was our reasoning, and that's why we went with this, and I'm pretty happy with it. So next slide, please. All right, another really fun one. You guys may have seen this if you go to the CIRA slider page. NCEP loves CIRA's proxy visible product, and we put it in D2D. It's, you know, the GOES microphysics is great, or nighttime microphysics is great, but everyone's always complaining about they can't see at night. So once we got this product into D2D, game changer. It's pretty self-explanatory about what you see with it, but basically CIRA has trained their algorithm on the VIIRS day-night band and then applied it to the geostationary GOES imagery. So that way, this is what you get. You can see the terminator very nicely, and it's a very, very useful tool. And that's all I'm going to say about that right now. Next slide. Okay, so here we get to tools instead. Again, this is a little bit Hurricane Center biased since I came from there. But the original looping in AWIPS2, while it was kind of fast, wasn't fast enough for the Hurricane Center, apparently. They like to speed that thing up really, really fast so they can try and get the center. So I think we quadrupled how fast the loop properties box was. So if you haven't noticed, go ahead and play with it. Pull out like a GOES-R Mezzo and jack that thing all the way up to 100, and you can get that thing to go pretty fast now. And if you are very interested in tropical cyclones and you can see that spin, unfortunately, I couldn't get it to spin quite fast enough in the image, but it is a lot faster than what it used to be. Maybe that also helps you when you're looking at clouds for other Met phenomenon, but that was an enhancement that we did, was to make that a lot faster with the left and right arrows. Next slide. Okay, so another one that we did was the centers, they started complaining a little bit about, oh, I've got to go to this menu and this menu and this menu to find all my data sets, whereas in AWIPS it was one button one-stop shopping. So we created a new menu for them for one-stop shopping. In particular, since it's the book club, I focused on the satellite menu. And this is just a breakout of what's there. This is a little bit of an older screenshot. So some of the centers obviously modified it for their particular needs and have added other data sets because they have custom data sets that are really neat. And then we also started building a pre-built 4-panel section, which is where you would see like the ASCAT or the microwave imagery 4-panel that I talked about. All that would be there, but then if in the future the field would like to modify their menus, if you don't take advantage of your local menu now, this just gives you kind of a picture of what the centers are looking at and how their data is organized, just for your awareness. Maybe it's useful to you. I don't know, I just wanted to share that as well. Next slide. All right, here's another one. So I know that all of the OBS right now, baseline wise, are all the lovely green color, which is perfectly fine. However, things can stand out a little better if they're colored with certain parts of the OB being different colors. There's also, be nice to do filtering where certain things stand out because they're a certain value above or below a certain threshold. So now that's available. Technically, all of the offices have this in their AWIPS now because it's baselined in 22.1. You just may not have noticed because your ITO or your AWIPS focal point, we need to go in and adjust those SVG files with the GUI that was provided for this change to update the colors and the text size and the fonts and things. But this is all available for you. If you'd like to change your procedures, you'll just have to, they'll break for a little bit until you go back in and fix them. But I think this is a really useful update that you may or may not be aware about. And if you have questions, you can ask me questions about those at the end too. Yes. I think it's much better than having everything being monotone green. I like green as much as the next person, but I do feel like the colors are better. All right, next slide. Okay, so something that's very new is, so the centers, you know, unless they hired someone from a WFO or had gone to other sorts of training classes, didn't really know much about how AWIPS works. So we started with forecaster training for them, and now they're getting more proficient and trained up, and we tried to make it as easy as possible for them. So if any of you guys at the field offices need to brush up or interested in this training for forecasters or users, let me know. But a new thing that we're doing is site admin and focal point training, which I know a bunch of that is out of date, or you have to read the AWIPS manual yourself, which is kind of a bear. So we tried to make that a lot easier. All of the site admin material is in progress because that's brand new. We're starting it. Some data providers like Sierra, they've started going to some of our brainstorming sessions. We've shown them a couple of training pieces, and they were quite excited as like the missing link for working with AWIPS or getting their data into AWIPS as a data provider. So they're pretty excited. I've got a picture here of a table we have in one of the trainings of what data plugin is best for such and such data. And that can help you make decisions on when you have a new data set or a custom data set, where it should go. So we cover things like that. We also cover display configuration and enhancements, data tailoring. So again, if you're worried about those DMW wins, you can always adjust your purge rules. You can adjust your data clipping to make that perform a little better for you. But we go into things like that. And so I'm really excited about it just because we can refresh some of the AWIPS training that's kind of old that's out there. I also do want to mention that I heard from OCLO and they're updating their GFE training, and that should be coming across the line, I think in about a month or so. So that's exciting too. So I'm going to pause there for a second, but if you want to flip to the next slide for a moment. because I know I'm going a little long. Do we have enough time for me to go over this, or do we not have enough time?
We'd like to get the questions in about 3 to 5 minutes if we could.
Okay, all right, I will speed through these then, because these are more just pictures. All right, let's flip to the next slide. All right, another really cool one. We can get D2D or GFE in D2D, and so now not only can you colorize your OBS, you can colorize your model grids with various colors. And next slide. In addition to that, you can get your GFE grids in D2D. And then it's you've got a couple load as options where you can get barbs or streamlines with there too. And then do your own imagery style rules and localization and things like that. Next slide. And you can apply the custom contour rules to your GFE if you choose so in D2D as well. Next slide. And we finally got discrete grids. Originally they were giving us an error, but now we've got those in, so you can look at your weather grid if you want to in D2D. And next slide. A couple of tools that we brought over from N-AWIPS, the locator tool. Instead of having your lat lawn covering up any data in your sampling, you can dock it on the lower left-hand side, and that will always show where your mouse is. Or in reference, or you can edit it to be in reference to other points of interest that I have on the left side. Next slide. And then the Seek tool, which the centers were using from N-AWIPS, it's got a couple of different modes. Basically, it's a different way from using the traditional distance tool, the distance bearing tool in AWIPS, just to see how far your mouse is from certain points. So I think that should be every single slide here. Yep, there we go. And I'm done, if anyone has any questions.
Hey, thanks, Monica. I'm going to facilitate the question and answer section. A couple of housecleaning, keeping things first. First, we encourage all of everyone to ask questions, especially from field offices and regional headquarters. And you can do that by putting some questions in the chat, or if you want to add, if you have a complicated question, you can ask them, turn your camera on, and we'll acknowledge it that way. I think we're supposed to fill out the feedback form. Lee Byerly just put it in the chat, so you have some feedback on the Satellite Book Club. Another announcement next week is Tony Reale, a physical scientist from NESDA STAR. He's going to show, discuss new caps for a February 2021 Midwest snowstorm. Also, if there's any questions about the Satellite Book Club or satellite configurations, contact Lee Byerly and Shad Bowman from the team. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and start with the questions, and I have I'll start with one of my own. And also, I just was going to mention that Monica and I worked together for 7 or 8 years at the Hurricane Center. She did such a great job with the N-AWIPS to AWIPS transition that CP snatched her up, and that's her position now. And I guess you're really spearheading that effort now as the lead of that, starting, I guess you said today or recently this year.
Yep,
So,
as of first of the year, I am the official head of that project now. Okay,
great. It was nice to see all the progress since I left a year ago. All right, so my first question is some of the enhancements that you showed, that were developed more for NHC and other national centers. Are there any limitations at a field office AWIPS system, for example, in terms of data flow? I know we got a lot of extra data besides the SBN at the centers, and also in terms of hardware limitations. So can the field offices do a lot of what you showed? Yeah, that's the main question.
Yes, they can. The thing that'll be a little more complicated is the data flow, because they're not, they don't have the non-SBN data flows. So what we'd have to do is have you work with Office of OBS, work with your regions to route those things to the region to have you get those things. So it'd be a little bit of a roundabout way as opposed to centers, which control their own destiny with their data. But you should be able to get any of those. ISATs, we used a lot for a couple of these. So talk to the ISATs focal point people for that. They already do it, so it's just a matter of let's ship the data to a new place because they're already processing it. So it's not like they're making something new for you.
Okay, thanks.
Just,
Oh, go ahead.
keep in mind your geographic region, and then clipping, you might want to clip the data or not, and just see how it works for you. So the biggest one you'd have to adjust to is the data flow.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. And I guess for the altimeter data, it was you mentioned that they also provide waveheights. That's really a great addition. That's why why the national centers are so interested in those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go through the chat questions. This is more of a comment from Roland Nunez. A huge win for the colorized observation plots, and I agree with that too. Those look great. I hadn't seen those before, so that's a comment. Bill Schoberg asked, he knows that NHC is using AMSR2. Have you discussed AMSR 3 on JAXA GOSAT goes west, or GW, I guess? That can't be goes west. So have you looked into getting AMSR 3 data?
So that would be something that the center individually has to communicate to us as something else they want to get added if they're not already working on it themselves.
So this is Schoberg. So it hasn't been launched yet, obviously,
Right.
but I think the current plan is to launch it in 2023. So it just might. I frankly didn't know too much about it, so until recently. So it'd be good to have those conversations, I guess.
Definitely.
Yeah. So maybe you can get that, stir that up a little bit in NHC.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be good to be more proactive about getting data ahead of time. So I agree.
Okay, and next question, I think is a general information question about the, will there be an email with links to some of the information you presented? And maybe that's more a question for Kashad or Lee. Do you share the presentations? I guess they can,
yes.
Okay. All right, next question from Eric Jacobson. You mentioned a few D2D enhancements like looping and seek locator tools. Are those baselined or using center ATANs?
So the seek tool and the locator tool in particular are using the center ATANs. We're working on trying to get those implemented into an overall baseline. Some of the other features that were mentioned are currently in the main AWIPS baseline that you can play with. And you feel free to send me an email to figure out what you have and what you don't have. And if we need to get you something else for something you're interested in, let me know.
Okay. The follow-up question, this is also from Roland Nunez. He asked if you discussed the A2 graphical editor. Is it as robust as the N-AWIPS version?
Now by that, I'm assuming they mean GFE.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it means by A2 graphical editor. I guess it's a comparing the editor in N-AWIPS versus AWIPS.
So I know for the centers, traditionally they've used PGen, which is product generation, which allows you to just draw on top of your data. Whereas GFE is using like gridded data sets that they transform into images for PowerPoint slides and things like that. So I know those are the two big differences. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what their questions are referring to, because there are very different flavors of editing and graphic production.
Okay, yeah, I can follow up with a PG palette is what he followed up with.
So the PGen, okay. Different use case, still useful. If you are interested in drawing on top of your data, I think we've made the most changes to PGen actually to get it to work properly in AWIPS2. It is pretty powerful, and depending on how you want to use it, it's available there and you can use it. for post-processing to make an image, you'd have to do something at your office in particular to get out an image. So each of the centers have their own post-processing scripts that they develop themselves to make images based off of the PGen output. But just regular drawing on top of it to like indicate certain things on top of the data, you can totally do that now, and it's pretty powerful. But again, different type of use cases between GFE versus PGen.
Okay. All right. This next question is from Galina Cherkova from Sarah. She asks if with your microwave full swath data display that you showed, do you apply any kind of limb correction to the data before you display it, or would that be something that you'd have to do post-processing?
I believe we do. That's a better question for Joe Zajic when he worked with Galina to get when we worked to get those images in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that may come up with some. Yeah, I thought I saw Joe on, but maybe he left by now.
Yeah.
But we can follow up with Joe because yeah, we have some experimental data we want to display from tropics as well that has the same issue.
I see.
Okay. Let's see what else. I think that looks like the last of the questions in the chat. But we got a few more minutes, so I'll ask another one. This is kind of center centric, but what are you also in charge now of the ATCF to AWIPS transition, or where does that project stand?
Yeah, I'm not the primary for that one. That's being led by Jim Calkins in CP. He shoots me a couple questions every once in a while, but he's the primary project manager for that. But it is getting wrapped up into AWIPS2, and they're making lots of progress.
Okay, so that's still moving?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great for the future, like you said at the beginning, to get everything in one platform.
Right, and then once it's in there, the WFOs can actually turn on the ATCF button and look at exactly what the Hurricane Center sees, and maybe that'll help with collaboration and working together too, because you'll be able to see the same thing, which is another really big benefit of getting the centers onto the same platform that the WFOs are doing.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that would be available to a research organization too, I guess, if we had to build sometime in the future. And then one final question, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Yeah, I guess there is one question from John. He's asking, what's the best way to get the training? Is that to email you, Monica?
Yes, send me an email. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a portal to house all the videos and the content, but right now it's still a work in progress. So the best way right now is to just send me an email.
Okay. And it looks like Lee was able to track Joe down. And he said that for answer 2, there's no limb correction. He said, but Joe says it can be added. So that maybe that's another way. And yeah, and to follow up with Galina. So we'll definitely be asking more questions about that. And then we'll just end here with the my last question is in terms of the time frame. I know we had a lot of momentum with the N-AWIPS to AWIPS2 transition until COVID happened and then you left. Is there a new timetable for that now? I know it's different for different centers.
Right.
But we were pretty close with NHC, at least with TAP-B. So any new updates on that?
So each center has their own timeline. Currently, we're focusing on WPC, AWC, and NHC. NHC is a little bit behind in that scenario just because they have to retrain their technical staff. So WPC is our front runner for switching first. They're actually doing a lot of other cool things like with the ensemble tool, which I didn't mention only because it's not done yet, but that's pretty awesome with that tool as well. So they should be done as one of the first centers and AWC shortly behind them. And then we've got other centers booked out for the next couple of years with SBC being towards the end just because they have a whole lot of data that they're doing. And then they have the most unique and demanding performance use case. So they're at the end. But every time we make an update and enhancement, all of the offices will be able to benefit from that. And then we'll be putting in things that we learn from the centers into the baselines. So that way the WFOs can use those benefits too.
Okay, well, good to see it's still moving.
Still moving.
Okay, and any final questions? Yeah, it looks like Bill Schober just followed up on the AMSR 3 data. Be available 1 year after 2023 launch. So there's still, that's the readiness date's not established yet. So that's not too far in the future, but not right away.
Gotcha. And Bill, my PIs with the JPSS risk reduction group, they're benefiting from all the training we're doing right now. So as they get farther into their projects and have data ready to go, that they want to get it into AWIPS, they can take the training we're providing and make that transition easier to have those on the operational platform rather than doing some sort of in-between visualization or workshop thing. So another reason, if you are interested in training, send me an email. That way you can get your data in front of forecasters a little easier or sooner rather than later, or you can make intelligent decisions about how you want to present your data to the forecasters.
Okay, well, at this point, I think we'll wrap up and I'll turn it back to Jordan and Kashad. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Monica, for that great presentation today. Lots of exciting things, new capabilities being added to support the N-AWIPS to AWIPS2 transition. So hopefully our field offices were listening and will start to take advantage of some of those new visualizations and some of those new data sets. As a reminder, next week, we'll have Tony Reale talking about new caps and a February 2021 Midwest snowstorm. That's going to be at our normal time of 12 noon Eastern on the January 13th. The tower, for this particular presentation, I'd like to remind everybody in particular that the Tower S team, Lee Byerly and Kashad Bowman, can field your questions not only related to the Satellite Book Club, but about the configuration of satellite products. So if you saw data in Monica's presentation, you're wondering how can I get that at my office, reach out to Lee, Kashad. I also see John Evans there. Let them know that you're interested in this. We would love to be in touch with you and help you receive that data that you need for your office. So with that, I'll wrap it up for today. Thanks everybody for showing up. We had very good attendance. Take care, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.